You cannot operate these services of Kenya Ferry services without emergency plans and standard operating procedures, because it's required a safety entry, a safety on board, and then safety exit. On daily operations, according to international standards, best practices, and observation of experts, it requires that when the ferry is being operated, we need to have the emergency plans in place, not just papers, but people doing the right thing at the right time. Because when the ferry is operating, you expect anything will happen. And as I said before, people entering the ferry, they need a sensitization the way you just enter an aircraft. There's no difference. People, before they enter the ferry, they need a holding place where they should have been checked the safety, and then they are trained, both vehicle in the vehicle, all papers in the vehicle, and those one as pedestrians. They need to understand the safety measures appertaining their transport while on the ferry. And at the same time, before this ferry takes off to the other side, we need to have on site an emergency plan operations management team, a team of a port carrying divers, carrying medics in case of an emergency. We need to have ambulance on standby. By this I mean also even the water ambulance. And this is very simple things. You cannot operate a ferry and those plans are not there. So when looking in all of these things, the way things happened, it's important that every people need to understand their responsibilities, and people must take responsibilities, because as on my own observation and as an expertise and according to the standards, you cannot operate this business without emergency preparedness plans. Why? If that vehicle, for example, the way a vehicle can get off the ferry, the way it has happened in the past, not only this instant, it will be easy for the emergency speedboat to arrive there and save these people immediately. Just ask yourself, how long did that vehicle take sailing on top before even sinking? It took quite some time. If there were people on standby, they would have acted swiftly to save those people. So what I'm saying is we need to be fully prepared. And it's not a responsibility of one agency. It's a responsibility of all manned agencies. The Kenya Ferry does not belong to a few people. It's about all of us. It starts from the Kenya Ferry themselves as the stakeholder. They need to involve the KPA, KMA, the National Police Service, and all other stakeholders. And the emergency plans, as I know they have, and I don't know whether they used it, because it's important that the plans brings everything that they need to put in place to save lives, to save property, and to be ready in case of an emergency. How long will it take to call somebody to rescue someone in water? Why should you people be away other than being on the ground, just available to swing on in case of an emergency? So I'm not blaming anyone, but it's important that investigation, when it's being conducted, it should be a wide investigation, ensuring that anyone who is responsible for any negligence must face the law. And this one must stop. Why should we lose lives? And we have the facilities. In this country, I say it's not about the facilities. And I thank the president of this country. He has put everything in place. We have people, but people must take responsibility. We don't act in a reaction way. What I've learned out of this country, and even that what has costed my job, because I left the government to work and support the government as supporting the civilian entity, bringing in issue of the preparedness, community approach. It is a responsibility of the individuals, the communities, agency-specific workplaces, schools. People must be told, must be given information. You don't assume, because what happened and what has been happening is people lack responsibility, and people must be fixed.
Thank you, Mr. Masai. I'd like to bring in our other panelists. Lucy, you know, all of you are saying you wouldn't like to point any fingers, but as we saw from the timeline, this is not the first time this is happening. Yes. Should heads roll?
They should. They should, because it's not the first time that it's happening. I think the Kenya Ferry services provided poor leadership. The first 1 hour as the night was falling, there should have been someone there from Kenya Ferry to begin briefing people, a PRO, someone, to take control in releasing the information to people out there. So there's a lot of panic, there was a lot of despair the whole night. Come the next day, there's no one there from Kenya Ferry. Stories of they're locked behind doors discussing. Then they come out and say they don't have the equipment. It took them more than 12 hours to figure out that they don't have equipment that is fit to go down there and retrieve the bodies. For me, that was totally unacceptable. But just going back to what our colleague in Kisumu has said, his approach is very expensive. It's very expensive because he's wanting the entire security agencies to be there. Now, what Kenya Ferry Services should have done is to develop an emergency section within themselves. It's still government because it's government owned. They should think about emergency rescue. We do have a center of disaster management in this country, but I think they're based only in Nairobi. They should think about how can we address to situations surrounding water bodies. The lady who was being interviewed, the diver, the master diver, she talked of an incident in Mutongwe where they retrieved a child from the waters. So it means we do have divers who are there. There's one who has been on the internet complaining that he's not recognized in his efforts, yet people want him to risk his life. So I think the whole area of marine security, we need to begin to build bridges, collaborate with one another. Those in private sector, I don't want to call them volunteers. Those who are there on the ground, they can work together immediately, almost immediately, to save the situation. But resources have to be allocated. And going back to what my colleague was saying earlier regarding the standards, internationally,
and you did mention divers. On the screen we have pictures of live pictures of the divers going in.
Yeah, but we do have international mechanisms that do give not only ferries but also ships the standards in which they're supposed to operate in, how the vessel is supposed to be maintained. All those standards have been set out for the ferries. In different countries, you will see they're clearly demarked where vehicles are to board and they're not beyond a certain section. The loading bay, the low board, at what level it's supposed to be at. And the ferry cannot move if it is low, because if water comes in to the ferry, say there is a storm or high tide,